works with the glorification of Maharaj Bharat. So we are resuming from verse 38. Sayan Prabhu, if you can read the translation.
Yes, the path of this material world is full of material miseries, and various troubles disturb the conditioned souls. Sometimes he loses and sometimes he gains. In either case, the path is full of danger. Sometimes the conditioned soul is separated from his father by death or other circumstances. Leaving him aside, he gradually becomes attached to others, such as his children. In this way, the conditioned soul is sometimes illusioned and afraid. Sometimes he cries loudly out of fear. Sometimes he is happy, maintaining his family, and sometimes he is overjoyed and sings melodiously. In this way, he becomes entangled and forgets his separation from the Supreme Personality of Godhead since time immemorial. Thus, he traverses the dangerous path of material existence, and on this path he is not at all happy. Those who are self-realized simply take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead in order to get out of this dangerous material existence. Without accepting the devotional path, one cannot get out of the clutches of material existence. The conclusion is that no one can be happy in material life. One must take to Krishna consciousness.
The long translation, this is essentially an explanation of 5:13:19, which talks about how the merchant, well, this part is not really allegorical, it kind of breaks the allegory. So there, that Bharat says that absorbed in the path by ignorance, such a person wanders about and does not understand anything. Right, so what is it that causes the person to be bound by ignorance? So here it is explained that both material attachments and material miseries. So somebody might think that material attachments is basically an elevated way to enjoy in this in this life, but actually both aspects, whether it is attachment or it is misery, both of them are causes of being bound to this material world. Because if there is too much miseries, then the person gets bewildered by the miseries, and if there is too much attachment, then the person gets lost in those attachment and enjoyment. So what is the solution? It says only in the association of devotees can one cross over the difficulties. And Vishwanath Chakravarti says that the wise point out that the Supreme Lord, Tam, from whom the material existence has risen, is the only way to cross over Param. So Tam Param. Param is the material existence and Tam is the Supreme Lord. And what is the cause of this? Vaishnav? Sangha. So we see that this verse is explaining why does the conditioned soul remain in the material world? Because it has this mixture of happiness and distress. So if there was only happiness in the material world, then the soul may sometimes inquire about more happiness. And if there was only distress, then the soul may strive to get out of that distress. But the fact that they are commingled, that when there is happiness, there is the enjoyment, but soon after that comes distress. Then there is the suffering. So the suffering person looks forward to the enjoyment, and the enjoying person, he enjoys in fear of the suffering. Right? So when Krishna describes the material world as dukhalyam and ashashvatam, then generally what we say is that ashashvatam refers to dukhalyam, that it is, the world is a place of suffering and a place of being temporary. But actually ashashvatam applies to both. It applies both to happiness as well as unhappiness. Right? So that is the biggest trap of Maya. The fact that it gives a little bit of everything. And that keeps the jiva busy in either trying to run away from one or trying to run towards something else. So Srila Prabhupada writes that materialistic life means continuous unhappiness, but sometimes we accept happiness as it appears between the gaps. Sometimes, the Prabhupada explains the wonderful analogy. He says when a person is submerged in water, then if he was to always remain submerged in water, then he would die. But when the person is submerged in water and then when he is about to die, then he is pulled out of the water. He is allowed to breathe a little bit and then again submerged in the water. So that's the nature of the material world. And then Prabhupada talks about what is the cause of escaping. Right? He quotes Chaitanya Charitamrita, sadhu sanga sarva shastra paya, lava matra sadhu sanga sarva siddhi paya. The potency of devotee association. Okay, so let's go on to verse 39.
Saintly persons who are friends to all living entities have a peaceful consciousness, have controlled their senses and mind, and they easily attain the path of liberation, the path back to Godhead. Being unfortunate and attached to the miserable material condition, a materialistic person cannot associate with them.
So, previous verse said that this material world is a cycle of suffering, which by its own nature is binding. But there is a solution to it, which is the association of devotees. So then one might say that, okay, we understand the problem, we understand the solution. All now we need to do is apply the solution to solve the problem. So Sukadeva Goswami says that here, unfortunately, those who are very materialistic will not agree to associate with the devotees, even though they may be munificent, they may be compassionate, they may be generous in giving their association. But those who are too materialistic will not take their association. And Prabhupada says that unfortunate people get this opportunity, which is Vaishnava Sangha, but due to their great misfortune, they cannot take shelter of pure devotees. And the result is they continuously suffer. And then Prabhupada brings the focus back to ISKCON, and he says that this Krishna consciousness movement insists that everyone take to this path by adopting the chanting of Hare Krishna Mahamantra. The preachers of Krishna consciousness go from door to door to inform people how they may be relieved from the miserable condition of material life. And then Srila Prabhupada gets it to the root, which is Guru Krishna Prasad by Bhakti Lata Peach. At first, by taking shelter of a bona fide spiritual master, one then begins to cultivate their seed of devotion and become freed from this material life. Okay. Verse 40.
There were many great saintly kings who were very expert in performing sacrificial rituals and very competent in conquering other kingdoms. Yet, despite their power, they could not attain the loving service of the Supreme Center of Godhead. This is because those great kings could not even conquer the false consciousness of I am this body, and this is my property. Thus, simply created and me, we rival king, fought with them, and died without having discharged life's real mission.
So this verse explains the analogy in 5:13-15, where Jad Bharat said that warriors who have conquered even the elephants of the direction think in terms of mine. Surrounded by enemies, all fall dead in the battlefield. So there's a fair amount of poetry in this verse, that the kings, what do the kings ultimately fight for? They fight for kingdoms, right? They want to expand the boundaries. So they're fighting for the ownership of earth. And because of that, they create so much of havoc and enmity. They become absorbed in it. And in the end, they themselves are consumed by earth. And in one of the scriptures, it says that when Mother Earth, she looks at these kings fighting with one another over that which does not belong to them. And so they're trying to fight over earth, and earth does not belong to them. They may be temporary custodians of it, but ultimately Bhudevi belongs to Lord Vishnu. So it says when Mother Earth sees the kings fighting over that which does not belong to them, then she feels compassion and pity for them. It's like two children, and they're fighting. They're fighting over the Taj Mahal. And no, this Taj Mahal belongs to me. This Taj Mahal belongs to you. And because of that, they come to blows. They punch one another, and ultimately, Taj Mahal does not belong to anyone of them. So this describes the situation. And Prabhupada then explains that the actual mission is to reestablish the forgotten relationship with Krishna through the process of bhakti. And then he also makes this point that one doesn't have to give up his occupation as a Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra, or whatever. In any position where discharging his prescribed duty, one can develop Krishna consciousness simply by associating with devotees who are representatives of Krishna and who can teach the science. Right? The Prabhupada makes this point over here because the verse is talking about Kshatriyas, kings who are also Grahasthas. So it's not that they have to give up their kingdom or they have to give up their family to give up their mentality. Right? Essentially, they can stay wherever they are. They don't have to give either the Varna or the ashram. All they have to give up is their mentality. That mentality that this is for me to enjoy, and this is, I am the sole cause of this, and transpose that to Krishna. So, in the first verse in the Ishopanishad talks about this, how does the person relate to consuming things that are around him? Right? The famous Ishavasyamitam Sarvam Yatkincha Jagatam Jagat. That nothing belongs to the person. But actually, even that's not completely true. There is one thing that does belong to the person. So what is it that belongs to the person?
Soul.
Okay. What else?
His free will.
Very good. So the one thing that does belong to the person is his free will. And the activities that he performs out of his free will also belong to the person. Which is why the reactions to the karma belong to the person if he does it out of free will. And that's why it's said that For the same activity, the culpability of a Shudra is much less than that of a Brahman, because the free will of a Shudra is much lesser than that of a Brahman. Similarly, devotional service that is performed out of the free will, it accrues to the person. So regardless of whether the person is situated in a particular varna or an ashram, the activities that he is performing out of his free will either bind him or liberate him. And Prabhupada quotes 1 to 13 that it really doesn't matter what activity a man engages in. If he can satisfy the Supreme Lord, his life is successful. Now, of course, the nature of bhakti is that it is also purifying if it is not, even if it is not performed out of free will. So when we are when we talk about Agyat Sukriti, even sadhana bhakti is more performed externally, right? So there is, of course, free will in adopting the sadhana, but the activities are more performed externally, that you do this, you do that. But the nature of bhakti is so purifying that even if it appears in slivers and small, there is a droplet of free will, then that itself is enough to start the person on the path of pure devotional service. Okay, moving on to verse 41.
When the conditioned soul accepts the shelter of the creepers of fruitive activity, he may be elevated by his pious activities to higher planetary system, and thus gain liberation from hellish conditions. But unfortunately, he cannot remain there. After reaping the result of his pious activities, he has to return to the lower planetary system. In this way, he perpetually goes up, come down.
So this verse explains 5:13:18, where it said that holding on to a creeper, afraid of an elephant, he remains dangling there. Right. So it expands on the point that was noted earlier on, that any happiness in the material world is temporary. So because of pious activities, the happiness might become strong. The jiva may get elevated to the higher planet system, where suffering is much less and enjoyment is much stronger. But still, the dukhalyam ashashvatam still remains over there. That even though the happiness is strong, it is still ashashvatam. It is still temporary. And there is always dukhalyam. Like we see that even Indra is being harassed. We see that even personalities like Brahma, they experience anxiety. Right? So because of this, the happiness eventually once again gives way to suffering. So Srila Prabhupada says that as a monkey takes shelter of a branch of a banyan tree and thinks he is enjoying, the conditioned soul, not knowing the real interest of his life, takes shelter of the path of karma-kand, fruitive activities. Sometimes he is elevated to the heavenly planets by such activities, and sometimes he again descends to earth. This is described by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as Brahman Brahmate. Same verse says that, the jiva is circulating in this Brahman, and koi bhagyavan pai by the shelter of the Guru. What does the person get? Get Bhakti Lata Beach. Right? The person gets the seed of devotion. So this verse concludes the explanation of the allegorical story by Jat Bharat. So Sukadeva Goswami was explaining the allegory to Parikshit Maharaj, and this verse concludes it. In the next set of verses, we see that there is the glorification of Bharat Maharaj, not of Jat Bharat directly, but actually Bharat Maharaj, the original personality, and there is the falsity. So we'll continue on to verse 42.
Having summarized the teaching of Jat Bharat, Sukadeva Goswami said, "My dear King Parikshit, the path indicated by Jat Bharat is like the path followed by Garuda, the carrier of the Lord. An ordinary king are just like flies. Flies cannot follow the path of Garuda. And to date, none of the great kings and victorious leaders could follow this path of devotional service, not even mentally."
So the story of Maharaj Bharat is concluded with his glorification by Sukadeva Goswami and ancient sages. So the first glorification, it comes as a caution. So it is said that one cannot even desire in his mind what to speak in activities to follow the path of Maharaj Bharat, the son of Rishabh. Now, one way of understanding this is that there may be some misguided people who think that Bharat Maharaj fell, but then ultimately he was liberated. So he committed certain offenses, he deviated, he fell, but then ultimately everything was okay. So Sukadeva Goswami is saying, don't do that. Maharaj Bharat is a special case. He calls him the son of, he says that, Vishwanath Chakravarti says that, son of Rishabha. Right? Son of Rishabha means that, so Rishabhadev is the personality of Godhead. And later on we'll see other qualities of Bharat Maharaj that are very, very difficult to emulate. Srila Prabhupada also gives additional understanding on this, that Maharaj Bharat, he followed the path of Bhakti. Now this is one of the few places where Prabhupada says that the path of devotional service is very difficult to follow. And then there is a but after it. But it becomes very easy if the candidate actually follows the path of the Mahajan. In this age, there is the path of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, by all accounts, Bharat Maharaj is a Mahajan. So, why don't we follow Bharat Maharaj? Because we follow that which is suitable to us. And so Prabhupada talks about it, saying that in this age, so for people like us born in the age of Kali, Mahaprabhu has appeared and he has given us the path of Hare Nam, Hare Nam, Hare Nam eva kevalam, kalau nastev, nastev, gatiranyatha. Right? So, while the pastimes of Bharat Maharaj has been put there to inspire us, but the caution is also given that in the current day and age, we are not qualified to follow his path. It's even in mind, which means one should not speculate that way. And if one acts in that way, then Prabhupada says, the path of devotional service will become very difficult. So, even when following exalted personalities, one should take guidance from one's spiritual master. The Bhagavatam is full of exalted personalities. And there are personalities that perform severe austerities. There are personalities that took so much suffering to please Krishna. There are personalities that beg for suffering to think more about Krishna. All of them are Mahajans, great personalities. Does not mean you follow them. Right? This will come in the next chapter also. What it means is that they're there to inspire us, but we follow that which we are asked to by our spiritual master or by our Parampara. Okay, moving on to verse 43. I think now this is the comeback to verse, so I read the Sanskrit. Yodushtyajandar sutan suhudrajam hridhi sprarsha jahu yue vimalvada uttam shlokalal shaha.
While in the prime of life, the great Maharaj Bharat gave up everything because he was fond of serving the Supreme of Godhead, Uttama Sloka. He gave up his beautiful wife, nice children, great friends, and an enormous empire. Although these things are very difficult to give up, Maharaj Bharat was so exalted that he gave them up just as one gave up stool after evacuating. Such was the greatness of His Majesty.
So here we see the reason as to why it is recommended not to try and imitate Bharat Maharaj. So one has to become like Bharat Maharaj to be able to imitate. And what was Bharat Maharaj like? So his extreme renunciation is given over here. And so we know that Bharat Maharaj, he ruled the entire earth planet. And not only that, he was materially very, very opulent. He had a beautiful wife, he had a nice family, enormous empire, friends. So everything that could make a person happy, Maharaj Bharat had that. And then he gave it up. So the way that he gave it up is also described over here. Right? So it's described that he gave it up just as one gives up stool after evacuating. Right? So in the beginning of the verse, Bharat Maharaj's attraction to the Supreme Lord is given, that he was fond of serving Uttam Shloka, the personality of Godhead. So the two qualities that made Bharat Maharaj exemplary are described here. Very strong spiritual attachment and very strong material detachment. Right? So Vishwanath Chakravarti says that one may argue that in the past, there are also personalities that have renounced everything. So why is Bharat Maharaj's renunciation being glorified? So the first reason he says is that you look at the analogy that is given to describe his renunciation, that he gave it up as stool. So Chakravarti Pad says that there are three aspects of giving up stool. One is that by giving up stool, one experiences bliss. Bliss may be a strong word, but at least one experiences relief. Second is that if one does not give up stool, one suffers. And third is that after having given it up, one does not have a least bit of attraction. In the sense that after one gives up stool, one doesn't go back and have any attraction. One does not say, you were in my body, you're a part of me. But in fact, one feels disgust. So that was the nature of Bharat's renunciation. That he was materially replete, but he did not have the least bit of attraction to it. In fact, he considered it to be a burden. And holding on to it was giving him pain. When he gave it up, then he felt relief. And then after having given it up, he never thought about it again. Like, there's no description of Bharat Maharaj being in the jungle and missing his wife or family or kingdom. Yet he just gave it up and he was completely detached from it. Then the reason for the renunciation is given. That why did Bharat Maharaj give up the material world as a stool? The reason is because of his attraction to the Lord. So this is what makes the renunciation of Bharat Maharaj glorious. So there are persons who do renounce everything. Some of them renounce it as a matter of, as a passage of time. Then when they go into Vanaprastha, they renounce everything. But they don't renounce it in this mentality of Bharat Maharaj. So they do not treat the material world as a burden. They treat it as a place of enjoyment, and when they give it up, then they still think about it. They still miss it, right? But Bharat Maharaj, his renunciation was there even before he renounced. And the second was that he was unique in the sense that his renunciation was only coming from the platform of devotion. Now, one thing to note over here is that the fall down of Bharat Maharaj is not mentioned in his glorification, even in passing. Now, in the verse 45, it will be mentioned as a way to glorify him. Now, why is that? Because so many chapters we have done, which is essentially talking about the fall down of Bharat Maharaj, right? His attraction to the deer, his giving up of his special practice. None of it is mentioned here. In fact, it is mentioned more as a glorification. Why is that? That's because when a devotee is redeemed, then it is as if he never fell. So Sukadeva Goswami and the other Vaishnavas, they are looking at Bharat Maharaj from that perspective. That when Bharat Maharaj reinstated himself, then it was as if he never fell. So it's not that they're constantly looking at Bharat Maharaj and say, oh, he fell, became a deer, and this is what happened, etc. That particular incident is completely wiped out. And this is what gives us the most hope. Because Bharat Maharaj fell for one life, and we have fallen for billions of lifetimes. And Bharat Maharaj developed attraction for a deer. We developed attraction for the whole material paraphernalia. We rebelled, we committed so many horrible acts. But what is the hope? That once we are reinstated, it will be that as if we never fell. So when we go back to the spiritual world, we won't carry this tag with us, the reformed prisoner, or back from earth, or 20 million lifetimes later on. And in fact, it's mentioned that even from a time perspective, it's said that when the jiva falls and returns to the spiritual world, it is as if no time also passed. Yes, time is different notation in the spiritual world. That's a little esoteric to understand, but just from the perspective of the quality of a redemption, that once we are redeemed, then we are redeemed in the truest sense. So redemption means that everything is now wiped off. Prabhupada writes that we have to learn from the great King Bharat how to become cautious in cultivating Krishna consciousness. A little inattention will retard devotional service for the time being. Yet any service rendered to the personality of Godhead is never lost. Swalpam apiyasya dharmasya trayate mahato maya. A little devotional service rendered sincerely is a permanent asset. And then he quotes 1517 from Bhagavatam, that if somehow or the other one is attracted to Krishna, then whatever he does in devotional service is a permanent aspect. And even if one falls down, then that devotional asset is never lost. Prabhupada said there are many examples of this. There is Ajmer, there is Maharaj Bharat, and many others. So he said this Krishna consciousness movement is giving everyone a chance to engage in devotional service for at least some time. Right? So he's making he's giving us a glimpse into the potency of what ISKCON is doing and what he's doing. That even if somebody comes and does a little bit of service, and for Prabhupada at different points will say different things, even if somebody holds the book, even if they don't give the money, if they hold the book in their hand, even if one thinks favorably about a devotee, even if one is on the street and the carts are being followed or being pushed for Rath Yatra, and they'll appreciate the deities or they appreciate the singing, the personal devotional service has started. So Prabhupada connects the name Uttam Shloka to the Krishna consciousness movement. He says that in this verse, the Lord is described as Uttam Shloka. So Uttam means the best and Shloka means reputation. The Lord is full of 6 opulences, one of which is reputation. Aishwarasya smargasya viryasya yasya shriha. So Krishna's reputation is still expanding. We are spreading the glories of Krishna by pushing forward the Krishna consciousness movement. Krishna's reputation 5,000 years ago after the battle of Kurukshetra is still expanding throughout the world. Every important individual within this world must have heard of Krishna, especially at the present moment, due to the Krishna consciousness movement. Even people who do not like us and want to suppress the movement are somehow or the other chanting Hare Krishna. They say the Hare Krishna people should be chastised. Such foolish people do not realize the true value of this movement. But the mere fact that they want to criticize it gives them a chance to chant Hare Krishna. And this is its success. So Prabhupada is talking about some of the very deep preaching aspects of ISKCON. Sometimes people criticize that why are you necessarily singing out on the streets? You're acting like beggars. Or sometimes they will say that why are you giving out books to everyone? The Bhagavad Gita is not different from Krishna, and people take it. And this actually I saw myself, that once we were giving out Bhagavad Gitas during the Festival of India, Rath Yatra, and then later I saw that so many Bhagavad Gitas were in the trash can. And in the metro, I saw that one person had a Bhagavad Gita. He was reading it. He was kind of flipping through the pages, and I was kind of happy to see he was doing it. And then after that, he got a little tired, and then he just put it down and just put his foot on the book and went off to sleep. And it kind of makes you feel that are you causing them to have great offenses? But then statements like this may be Prabhupada come to your support that no. When the person holds the book, reads the book, appreciates it a little bit, then the person's devotional journey has begun. So even if they are making fun of it. Okay, so let's move on to verse 44. Yadushyajan Shruti Sutta Swajanarthadaram Prathan Shriyam Suravera Satyavalokam Naicham Nirpas Tadushitam Mahatam Madhuvit Seva Nukrata Manasham Abho Piphalgu.
Sukadev Goswami continued, my dear king, the activities of Bharat Maharaj are wonderful. He gave up everything difficult for others to give up. He gave up his kingdom, his wife, his family. His opulence was so great that even the demigods envied it, yet he gave it up. It was quite benefiting a great personality like him to be a great devotee. He could renounce everything because he was so attracted to the beauty, opulence, reputation, knowledge, the strength and renunciation of the Supreme Son of Godhead, Krishna. Krishna is so attractive that one can give up all desirable things for his sake. Indeed, even liberation is considered insignificant for those whose minds are attracted to the loving service of the Lord.
So essentially, this is a paraphrase of the previous verse. Right? It talks about the material opulence of Maharaj Bharat and how he considered it insignificant. Even in this verse, liberation is also added. So, in addition to mukti, and he gave it all up for bhakti. Vishnu Chakravarti says that Sukdev Goswami is so joyful in glorifying Maharaj Bharat that he repeats the same point out of joy. So it's some repetition is done for various reasons. Sometimes it's done for emphasis. The same point is made a few times for the sake of emphasis. That's the most common cause of repetition. Sometimes it is done out of joy. The person is simply not satisfied with glorifying and he glorifies again. Right? And sometimes it's done out of bewilderment. Like when you see Uttara is, she feels the Brahmastra enter her womb, and she goes and she's calling Krishna. Krishna is in front of her, and she's calling Krishna by different names over and over again. Right? Acharya says because out of bewilderment, she's essentially, it's repetition because of bewilderment. Here it is because of joy. So the phrase Shriyam Sadhyavalokam, it can be interpreted in two different ways. So Shriyam refers to Lakshmi Devi, right? And Sadhya Avalokam refers to her merciful glance. And Na Ichat refers to did not desire. So Chakravarti Pad said this can be understood as two things. One is that Bharat Maharaj did not desire the merciful glance of Lakshmi Devi, which is being always sought by the Suravara. Suravara means by the best of the demigods. So with that interpretation, Chakravarti Pad says that one can understand what Sukdev Goswami is saying, that those who are followers of Bharat Maharaj, they also, when they glance at wealth, when they look at wealth, then they say, may Lord Bharat have mercy on her. Her meaning, may Lord Bharat have mercy on Lakshmi Devi. Why? Because the real mercy on Lakshmi Devi is to employ her in the service of Lord Vishnu. Right. So Chakravarti Pad says that this explanation is given by Sridhar Swami. That this phrase means that the followers of Bharat Maharaj look upon Lakshmi Devi and within their hearts think that Bharat Maharaj should have mercy on her by engaging her in the service of Lord Vishnu and by not desiring her for personal enjoyment. The second meaning is that when Lakshmi Devi looks at Bharat Maharaj, then she thinks that Bharat Maharaj should not accept the pains of leaving me. He should remain in the house pampered by me. So this is a little bit of a So Lakshmi Devi is very fond of the devotees of Lord Vishnu. And when she sees the extreme renunciation of Bharat Maharaj, then she also feels sad. And so she says that no, he should not leave me. He should allow me to serve him. Like it said that Lakshmi Devi on her own is Chanchalam. She comes and goes, and she comes with great difficulties. But for the devotees, she's always ready to serve. It's just another thing that the devotees don't care for her because they're so absorbed in the service of Lord Vishnu. So in addition to wealth, then Abhava means that even liberation became insignificant to Bharat Maharaj, right? So the verse essentially is like a summary. It's describing the superiority of Bhakti over Mukti and Mukti. So Prabhupada writes that, that the Mayavadis are attracted to merging into the existence of the Lord. But Krishna is more attractive than the desire to merge. The word Abhava means not to take birth again in the material world. The devotees doesn't care whether he's going to be reborn or not. And so Prabhupada just talks about the superiority of the bliss of bhakti over the bliss of liberation. And of course, the lowest form of that bliss is the Mayavadi, who want to merge into the existence of Lord. But then they are the bona fide mukti kamis who want to go into the Brahman. They may not want to merge into the Brahman, they want to go into the Brahman. Even for them, the opportunity to do render personal service to the Lord is infinitely more. So Prabhupada quotes a couple of verses from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. He says, one who acts to serve Krishna with his body, mind, intelligence, and words is a liberated person, even in this material world. And then he quotes Chaitanya Charitamrita, same point is made by Mahaprabhu when he instructs Rupa Goswami, Krishna Bhakta Nishkama Ateva Shanta Bhukti Mukti Siddhi Kami Shakali Ashanta. And so those who are basically looking after Bhukti Mukti Siddhi, they are Shakal Ashant. They're always Ashant. Ashant means Shant is peaceful, Ashant is agitated. Right? And Krishna Bhakta Nishkam Ateva Shanta. But the devotee of the Krishna is always peaceful. Okay. Verse 45. Yagyaya dharma pataya viddhine punaya yogaya sankhya sarase pratikshvaraya Narayanaya haraye nama ityudaram hasya nrigatvam apiya samudajata.
Even though in the body of a deer, Maharaj Bharat did not forget the supremacy of Godhead. Therefore, when he was giving up the body of a deer, he loudly uttered the following prayers. The supreme person of Godhead is sacrifice personified. He gave the result of ritualistic activities. He is a protector of religious system, the personification of mystic yoga, the source of all knowledge, the controller of the entire creation, and the super soul in every living entity. He is beautiful and attractive. I am quitting this body, offering obeisances unto him, and hoping that I may perpetually engage in his transcendental loving service. Uttering this, Maharaj Bharat left his body.
So here we notice there's a reference to Bharat Maharaj in the body of a deer, but it's glorification. Because what is mentioned is that even when he was in the body of a deer, he was essentially executing pure devotional service. Right. So in 3 lines, what is Bharat Maharaj? So this is the prayer that was spoken by Bharat Maharaj. Slight difference in the interpretation between Srila Prabhupada and Vishwanath Chakravarti. Prabhupada says that he said this prayer when giving up his body, and Vishwanath Chakravarti says that he said this prayer while he was in the body. So he said that this was a constant meditation while he was in his body. So we see that in 3 lines, Bharat Maharaj, he glorifies the Lord successively as the ultimate goal for karma, jnana, yoga, and bhakti. And he puts them as having greater and greater excellence, right? So he says, so first he says, yagyaya. So yagyaya is karma kanda. So unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who enjoys the result of great sacrifices. Right? That's the first glorification. Then he says, Sankhya Shirase. Now this is Gyan. So who taught the Sankhya philosophy, who actually gives knowledge of Sankhya to the people. And then the third is Yogaya. Yogaya is Asthana, that the personification of mystic yoga. Right? And then finally, the highest is that I may perpetually engage in his transcendental devotional service. So, in other words, the verse glorifies the Lord in the mood of a devotee, as if a devotee is glorifying the Lord, that he is the destination for karma, for jnana, for asthana, and for bhakti, and the best of all is bhakti. So as I mentioned, that Vishnu Chakravarti states that Bharat Maharaj chanted this verse desiring to give up, but not at the time of death. Right? And he chanted it so that the Lord would make him take birth again to perfect his bhakti. Right? So this point is made by Chakravarti Pad that the way he explains it, that if Bharat Maharaj had chanted this at the time of death, then he would not have taken birth again. The whole Antakale Chamameva. If he had thought of the Lord in this way at the time of death, then by virtue of that, he would have been liberated. But since the Lord had other plans for him, the Lord wanted him to take birth again to preach to Maharaj Rahugana, and for those teachings to be given to us. So he was not able to think in this way at the time of death, but nevertheless, he was able to pray for this while in the body of the deer, by virtue of which he was elevated to a human body. Because generally speaking, you don't get a human body out of the body of a deer. And as I mentioned, Srila Prabhupada explains it slightly different. He says that although Bharat Maharaj had to accept the body of a deer, he could remember Narayan at the time of death. Consequently, he took birth as a perfect devotee in a Brahman family. This confirms the statement of Bhagavad Gita, Suchinam Srimatam Geha Yogya Bhrasta Vijayat. That one who has fallen from the path of self-realization takes birth in a family of Brahmins or wealthy aristocrats. Although Maharaj Bharat appeared in a royal family, he became neglectful and took birth as a deer. Because he was very cautious with his deer body, he took birth in a Brahman family as Jat Bharat. During this lifetime, he remained perfectly Krishna conscious and preached the gospel of Krishna consciousness directly, beginning with his instruction to Maharaj Rahugana. In this regard, the word Yogaya is very significant. The purpose of Astanga Yoga, as stated by Madhavacharya, is to link or connect with the personality of Godhead. The goal is not to display some material perfections. Okay, so now we move on to the last verse of this chapter. If you can read the translation, Prabhu.
Devotees interested in hearing and chanting Sarvanam Kirtanam regularly discuss the pure characteristic of Bharat Maharaj and praise his activities. If one submissively hear and chant about the all auspicious Maharaj Bharat, one lifespan and material opulence certainly increase. One can become very famous and easily attain promotion to the heavenly planets, or attain liberation by merging into the existence of the Lord. Whatever one desire can be attained simply by hearing, chanting, and glorifying the activities of Maharaj Bharat. In this way, one can fulfill all his material and spiritual desires. One does not have to ask anyone else for these things, or simply by studying the life of Maharaj Bharat, one can attain all desirable things.
So this is the last verse of the chapter, which is also the Falstuti. Now, there's something very interesting to note in this Falstuti. I just wanted to see if anybody has spotted it or would like to comment on it. What is something that stands out in this Falstuti?
One's lifespan and material opulences certainly increase, it says. Typically, although the blessing is more spiritual in nature, one would think.
Very good. So it superficially, it looks like it is going against the flow that is being established in the previous set of chapters. Like when Jat Bharat, he preached to King Rahugana, he roundly condemned material enjoyment. You're a king, you think you're a king, but actually you're just the soul that is pretending to be that which it is not. So directly, and the whole allegory of the forest of material suffering, over and over again, it condemns, right? And not only does he, but Sukadeva Goswami also, he also, in explanation of the allegory, and in later on in glorifying Bharat Maharaj, he's again condemning material enjoyment. Now, what is the first to be over here? That if one submissively hears and chants, one's lifespan and material opulences certainly increase. One will become very famous and easily attain promotion to the heavenly planets or attain liberation. Just in the previous verse, liberation was condemned. So now it's offered as a Falastuti, or attain liberation by merging into the existence of the Lord. Whatever one desires can be attained simply by hearing, chanting, and glorifying the activities of Bharat Maharaj. In this way, one can fulfill all his material and spiritual desires. So this gives us an understanding of why the Falastuti is material. Because one can validate the material aspects of the benediction. And when the material aspects are validated, then the faith and the ability to deliver the spiritual aspects grow. So that's why the Vedas, majority of the Vedas are Karam-Kand. And what does Karam-Kand give you? It gives you material happiness. That's not the purpose of the Vedas. But the Karam-Kand is there so that one develops faith in the Vedas. And then one then looks into the higher purpose of the Vedas. So it's essentially a hook. When you have to catch a fish, you put a worm on a hook, and the fish is attracted by the worm, and then it gets trapped by the hook. So this Falstuti is acting in that way. That all kinds of material opulences can and will be attained. Right? So if somebody develops faith in it and starts following it with material desires, then all kinds of material opulences can and will be obtained. But then what else? That in this way one can fulfill the material and spiritual desires. but does not have to ask for anything else. So one just goes to Krishna for material as well as spiritual. So this is called misdirection for a higher purpose. The material opulences is not the falstuti of the pastime of Bharat Maharaj, but it is misdirection for a higher purpose. Now, it doesn't mean that the material opulences will not be obtained. Yes, it will be obtained. The falstuti is not saying anything false, but it is a means to an end. And the scriptures, as I mentioned, they practice this widely, misdirection for a higher purpose. Krishna is directing, when in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is directing towards material enjoyment or towards intellectual understanding, towards cities. All this is misdirection for one to take to bhakti. Second understanding is that these opulences that are being promised, they are not material, but they're spiritual benedictions. So all this that is being mentioned over here is available in the spiritual world in infinite amounts. So auspiciousness, wealth, fame. In fact, one may argue that they're only available in the spiritual world. In the material world, one only sees a convoluted reflection of them. So if one wants real happiness, one wants real auspiciousness, one wants real wealth, then follow the instructions of Bharat Maharaj and find these things in the spiritual world. Third understanding is that when the devotees follow this path, then all these are automatically available to them. So the falstuti is not promising them as an end, but it is promising them as unintended side effects. That while you're attaining spiritual perfection, you will also enjoy all these material opulences. And what if you say, I don't care? I said, fine, don't care. They're still there. They're still waiting for you. That's the third understanding. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada, he summarizes the allegorical story of Jat Bharat. So I'm not going to read the purport, but the summary is also there in the table that I shared with you, where Prabhupada talks about that the six plunders, or rather Sukadeva Goswami explains the six plunders are the senses, the bad leader is the diverted intelligence, and the jackals and the tigers in the forest are family members, the herbs and creepers are material desires, mountain caves are happy hope. So he essentially summarizes it over here. Okay, so this brings us to the end of the 14th chapter, the material world as a great forest of enjoyment. And I will pause over here and see if there is any discussion.
Prabhu, I was also thinking that after hearing this narration of Jada Bharat and the material forest fire of material existence and all those things, one may really don't want to aspire for that. Even the philosophy says one will attain opulences. One may really don't want to aspire for that. Rather, they would go for spiritual path, and then these things become side benefits, not necessarily. So I was thinking like that. Who would really want to go for material opulence after hearing all these things? Isn't it? It's kind of interesting.
And it's put in there as a discernible index, right? Because spiritual advancement may be so subtle that one may not notice it, but because the falstuti is promising all these material advancements, those can be observed more easily. So when the devotee observes this in this life, and he says, okay, if this part is true, the other part is also true. But like you're saying, the devotee may or may not desire it. So the falstuti is essentially casting a wider net. It's trying to attract those who are more interested in material aspects. Like I said, that was one understanding. Also promising all this in the spiritual world to increase their attraction for going back to Godhead. And the third, like I mentioned, is also just to give some discernible symptoms of spiritual progress, that all this, like we know from nectar of devotion, right? That when we engage in bhakti, then Kleshangani and Shubhada happen. So Shubhada is all auspiciousness, right? That happens. And that is a discernible symptom in the earlier stages of bhakti, just for us to be reassured that yes, we are making progress.
Hare Krishna, just a comment on that. They said, no, when you light a fire, there is light, heat, and smoke that come with the fire. That means when we are hearing all this pastime, the benefit will be there. But they said, whatever one desire, then the desire, I think, is a key word. And if we desire to get this, then we'll get it. And how do we use it?
That is true. That is true. That the potency of listening to this with faith is there, and one can use the potency based on their own conditioning. So Sukdev Goswami, having condemned materialists through the whole chapter, Jat Bharat condemning material through this chapter, is now showing his mercy on them, saying that don't worry, I've said so many bad things about you, I've condemned you, I've shown you in such a poor light, but there's hope for you also. All you have to do is to listen to this pastime with faith, and all your little material desires and big material desires will be fulfilled. But what the materials will not realize up front is that while he's making all these material desires come true, he's also making spiritual progress, which is the real purpose of Sukdev Goswami putting it over there.
Thank you, bro.
Thank you. Any other thoughts, comments?
Just one comment is it was one of a kind of a allegory, which is very, intertwined and difficult to guess.
They are. So if Parishad Maharaj found it difficult to understand, difficult for us. So that's why Sukadeva Goswami explains it, and actually we get the explanation 3 times. One is when the allegory is being spoken, Prabhupada gives the explanation in the purports. Second time is when Sukadeva Goswami speaks it, Prabhupada explains it again. And the third is in the concluding verse, he once again explains the allegory more mechanically. This is this, this is this, this is this. So it's testimony to the fact that it's a little obscure to understand. So by the mercy of Maharaj Rahugana, Sukadeva Goswami, and Srila Prabhupada, we are able to get something out of it.
To the same note, Prabhu, until now I was thinking the analogy of, not analogy, basically the statement from Yamunacharya on the sex, where he states that it is like a lump of meat when you see the opposite sex, or it is like spitting. Now this is the second time I heard about this analogy of this stool. Amazing the way they put it. Even now, if we still try to hang on to this material, it is worse, I can say. This needs to be digested well to our conscious.
It does, and I think the way Vishwanath Chakravarti explains, Raghunath Maharaj also speaks on this at more length. The whole stool analogy, we get a sense both we get a sense of material attachment and what real detachment looks like. Sometimes we think that we're detached, and sometimes we think that we are there, we have transcended material desires. But then we look at it from the holistic perspective. That do we actually lose all attraction to it? In fact, do we develop disgust for it? And even when we have it, do we look upon it as a burden? And do we feel happy in giving it up? Right? And then answer to all three would be no, no, no. And then we feel that yes, more work needs to be done, more rounds need to be chanted.
And not only in rounds, basically mercy also should be there. I think the mercy of devotees and Guru.
Mercy should be there. Absolutely right.
Actually, Prabhu, this is a second blow. Like the hurricane come, you get one turn like this, and then when you go away, you get the other turn like that. In the King of Puranjana, we already got the first, swirl and blow, and now this is the second one.
Yeah, yeah. Both the allegories are very, very strong and direct.
Yeah, there also it was about the opposite sex too.
Yeah.
How he was, plunged in all this. Anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
It's the second one.
Yeah, yeah. These are the two places, three places in the Bhagavatam where material. I mean, that's a general theme, but three places where it is very strongly condemned. One is in these two allegories, and the third is when towards the end of the third canto, when Lord Kapila is speaking directly to his mother, the concluding instruction of his mother. I think verse 29 or 30, chapter 29 or 30. And then also he speaks very, very strongly about condemns the material world. Right? You read those, you get a strong sense of being shaken up. That we are complacent here, and great personalities are speaking about it. Unfortunately, it goes away, but at least some of it hopefully stays back. Okay, so we have a decision to make. The 15th chapter is got 16 verses, but relatively longer preaching purports there. We can start with the chapter now, but I see that we have I see that we have how much time left? See that we have 15 minutes left. So should we start the chapter now, or should we end here and start the chapter next week? I'm okay with either of the two.
Yeah, I think for the flow, if we won't be able to, will we be able to complete it in one session next time?
It's about 2 sessions, 2 full classes.
We can continue next week.
Same for me, Prabhuji, because I'm parallel working also. So for me, tomorrow, next class would be more ideal. I'm hearing actually not with 100% attention, but still I am hearing today. So that's my situation. So next class would be.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
So we'll end here today and start with the next, so the next chapter is actually kind of like I said, it's a short chapter of 16 verses. The purports are a little long. Some of the purports are long. I'll clarify them. Many of the, because this is essentially descendants of King Kirvata. So many of the verses don't have any purports. It just says father, son, 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 etc. But Prabhupada in some cases he uses it for preaching purposes also. And some of them are interesting use of some terms that I found would be interesting for discussion also. So we'll start it in the next week. Panchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Anant Koti Vaishnavinda ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hi, Gaur Premanand. Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.